is in relation. Thanks, Linda, for recording. Just a reminder again that we're recording this session and that the recording will be sent to you later, and it should also be available on the website later on at some stage. So just what we're going to talk about now is data breaches, what they are and how to handle them, data subject rights, and then just to have a quick conclusion and to deal with any remaining questions. If you just put the questions into the chat, please. So I suppose to get straight into it, to see what a data breach is, and I suppose this cartoon in some way just summarizes exactly what a data breach is. So you'll see on the left-hand corner there, you have our in the corner, we have all our firewalls, encryptions, antivirus software, all our policies and procedures. And then in our right-hand corner, we have Dave, and Dave is human error. And all the research will show, and from my experience as well, that by far the research will say about 80% of data breaches are down to human error. In my experience, 95% of any of the data breaches that I've had to report are down to human error, you know, and we all make mistakes. I think that the trick, what I say as a parent to my kids, is to learn from your mistakes. And from a data protection point of view is, you know, if you make a serious mistake, it frightens the life out of you, you know, and you will be more careful. So we don't want to be in that situation. What we want to do is to avoid mistakes, and to just, sometimes we need to just slow down a little, just check those emails, just check things, and just before you click the send button or you click on that link, just make sure that you're doing the right thing. So just in terms of the definition of what a data breach is, and this is the GDPR definition, a personal data breach means a breach of security leading to the accidental or unlawful destruction, the loss, alteration, unauthorized disclosure of or access to personal data transmitted, stored, or otherwise processed. So that can be temporary loss as well, if it has a significant effect on the data subject, you know. So that's the definition. In terms of a breach, what you do, and you need to take immediate action under the legislation. The data controller, which is FORSA, so in my case it would be me as data protection officer, we have, once we become aware of the breach, we have 72 hours to report the breach to the Data Protection Commission. And when you're reporting the breach, it's all done in an automated fashion, and they will ask questions like, when did the breach happen? And they will ask you the hour and the minutes, you know. Then they will say, have you reported it within 72 hours? Then they will ask you why you haven't, and what time did you find out about that? And again, it's within the minute. And then they'll ask you why you didn't report it within the 72 hours. So that's all really, really important. And those 72 hours go so quickly. So as soon as, even if you're not sure it's a breach, because sometimes it takes time to figure out, is it actually a data breach or not? And if as soon as you have suspicions or worries, best thing to do is contact me at dpo@forsa.ie or ring in to reception, and somebody will get me and we can talk it through. Like even for myself, there was an issue a number of years ago where a briefcase went missing, but we didn't know what was in the briefcase. So it was until somebody went to the police station and collected the briefcase from the police station and saw what was in it, and there was no personal data in it. We weren't sure whether it was a breach or not, you know. So just you can find yourselves in sort of strange circumstances sometimes, and it can take a bit of time to figure out if it is a data breach or not, and whether you need to report it to the Data Protection Commission. So the type of questions that I will ask you, because I will be asked this from the DPC, is what happens, you know. And again, that's why I don't have a form as such that people fill out. It's better that you sort of delve down into the details. So what's exactly happened, and what data fields are involved, and generally the more data fields involved, the more significant the breach is. So if you're talking about Martina O'Leary, and she's a member of Round Towers Clondalkin GAA Club. That's not a breach, but Martina O'Leary, and she's attending particular health specialists. That is a different, it is a different situation. And what the Data Protection Commission look at is, the question they'll ask is, what are the risks to the rights and freedoms of the data subject? That's the measure. And when I'm filling out the breach form, I'm asked to say whether it's to classify the level of breach that I think it is. Is it low, is it medium, or is it high? Generally ours will be low, but again, it depends on what it is. So say, for instance, it's your email address, that's one thing. But if it was your bank details and things like that, or it was details of a personal case, you know, maybe, for instance, details that you were, you know, being disciplined for particular reasons or whatever, or there was medical records, well, then that's high and that's significant, you know, and it's the risks and freedoms to you as members. So that's what the Data Protection Commission looks at. I'll also ask you, what's the quantity? So how many people did the email go to? Was there personal data in the email? That type of thing. What have you done? And who else is involved? So they're the type of questions that if you come to me with an incident or data breach, that I will be asking you, and they're the questions that the DPC will be asking me. And I'm doing this because, as I said, that 90% of the data breaches involve emails and human error. So if there is an issue in regard to an email breach, what I want you to do, even before you pick up the phone to me, is try and recall the email. And I've written it down there. Most of us use Outlook, not everybody, but most of us use Outlook. So that's how, in terms of Outlook, you would recall a mail, okay? And you'll have that in your slides as well. Then best to contact me. If you can't contact me, talk to your official, but try to contact me. And also really, really important, if you have done this, is to send an email using the BCC button, please, to the original recipients, and then ask them to delete the mail, say that it was sent inadvertently, and ask them to delete the mail and not to forward it to anybody else. And you'll also obviously have to include the information that you were sharing in the first place. We've been asked by the Data Protection Commission to take these steps. So it is important that we do that, because again, when I'm reporting the data breach, they will ask, you know, what's happened and what mitigating steps have you taken to try and stop this breach? And I need to be in a position to say this mail has gone to the original recipients, and that's the situation I need to be in, and that is important. And I suppose the possible consequences of breaches, you know, and there are several consequences here. And one is the reputational damage to Forsa. And you can picture and you can hear, and you may have witnessed the tea break chat, you know, where something has happened. Maybe it wasn't within the union, maybe it was within the bank, maybe a different organization, where there has been a breach, you know, and your faith within that organization goes. So like, if you have somebody sitting in the canteen who's thinking of joining the union, and then the conversation says, you know, well, there's just been a data breach, they've just breached my data, would you join that organization? You know, so it is so important. Again, obviously, it needs to be reported to the Data Protection Commission. The Data Protection Commission has the power to have investigations. They have the power to fine us. Because Forsa is within the special categories of data, we're talking about the higher fines. That's what they will be looking at there. They can also do a thing which is as significant, if not more significant, than the fines, particularly for, yes, for a trade union, but for small businesses, or you know, people like this, or organizations like that, they have a thing called an enforcement order. So basically, they can come in, they can investigate, they can look at all your processes, and they basically do an audit, and they will ask all sorts of questions, and they can then say, I want you to stop processing until you've done A, B, C, and D. Now, A, B, C, and D could cost you a fortune. And if Forsa as a trade union couldn't access, say, for instance, our membership system or our members' files or something like that, well, then really we are in trouble, or any other small organization is in trouble, you know, and they have significant powers, and we do not under any circumstances want to be in that place. And that's why this is all so important. Then they can, members or people can take legal action against the union, and they can have compensation there as well. So there are significant consequences to the organization, and that's why it's so important that we comply with the GDPR. And I've mentioned these already, but just in terms of the powers that the DPC have, they can go in and have tell you to have a compliance order. They can also tell you to communicate a personal data breach with a data subject. So say, for instance, a number of years ago, I got an email from Ticketmaster and they'd been hacked. And we're all aware that big organizations who have significant resources are being hacked, and these cyber criminals, that's what they are. These aren't students sitting in a bedroom sort of trying to hack in. These are professional organizations who are trying to get into your systems for whatever reason, for denial of service or whatever else. But they are, don't be fooled to think that they're not professional. They're really extremely professional and extremely dangerous organizations, these cyber criminals. So just in terms of Ticketmaster, they had to write to me, and imagine if Fórsa had to communicate with 80,000 members, particularly maybe if we've been hacked and we haven't got access to that data at that time, and tell me that my bank details may well have been hacked, and I should really get a new card and change my passwords and things like that. So that's a significant thing that an organization would have to do. And again, I've said that they have the power to impose temporary or definitive limitations on how we process the information. So they have a lot of powers, and we need to be aware of that. So again, just a reminder in terms of handling a breach, if you become aware of a breach, please contact me immediately, because that clock is ticking, and that clock, those 72 hours go really, really quickly. And myself as Data Protection Officer of Fórsa would notify the Data Protection Commission. And then I would keep, again, I refer to the logs and the registers I need to keep. So I would need to register that in my in sort of the log for instance and breaches, and I would need to put in that if there's any risk, so that would need to go into the risk register as well, and how we dealt with the risk and how we're going to mitigate against that risk. So there's a lot of work in that, and it is extremely serious. Now, so just in terms of data breaches, that's it really. I'm going to move straight ahead on to data subjects rights, and the GDPR gives data subjects significant rights. I suppose from Fórsa's point of view, the one that we come across most of the time, we do come across others from time to time, but the one is that members have a right to access their personal data that we hold on them. And it's called a data subject access request. So generally, if you have a member saying, I want access to my personal data, best to contact me immediately, and between us, we will deal with the request. Again, I need to log that request into their registers, because say, for instance, we respond to the request and then the member isn't happy with the response, they may complain to the Data Protection Commission. And if I don't have that in my register, and if I'm not aware of it, I will be at sea in terms of dealing with the Data Protection Commission. So it's important that you contact me and we deal with it together. Members and data subjects are also entitled to know how their information is being processed. So that's, again, the fair processing notice that I mentioned this morning. Members are also, and data subjects are also entitled to rectification. So that's to fix a record or to correct a record. It may not be maybe so important from a trade union point of view, but say from a HR perspective, if there's something on your file that needs to be rectified, that is important, or on your bank's records, if you're applying for loans and there's misinformation on your files, again, that is important. So you have an entitlement to rectification, and you have an entitlement to erasure. It's commonly referred to as the right to be forgotten. Now, there are caveats to that, and under certain circumstances. So say, for instance, a member contacts us and says, I want you to get rid of all of my information, but you know that they're thinking of considering suing the organization, well, then you would have a right to protect yourself in a legal situation to hold on to that information. Say, for instance, Forsa would hold on to the fact that you were a member of the organization for several years because of what we're obliged to do under the Trade Union Acts and because of rules within the Irish Congress of Trade Unions as well. So there are caveats to the right to be forgotten. So just to be aware of that. It's not just a carte blanche. And then rights members and data subjects have the right to withdraw consent for processing or withdraw consent. So I've mentioned it earlier this morning. If you're using consent as the lawful basis for processing, you need to make it as easy to withdraw consent as it is to give consent. Again, really around direct marketing, but particularly marketing, you need to be able to, the members have the right to ask people to stop contacting them, but it's more for other organizations who are doing a lot of marketing. They can restrict processing. They have the right to data portability. This will be, again, more for banks, insurance companies, and it's just their core information then can be transferred to the new bank, the new insurance company easily. They have the right to object to processing, and obviously they have a right, members and data subjects have a right to lodge a complaint to the DPC, the Data Protection Commission. That's pretty much it in terms of data subject rights. The most important thing is if you get a request for any of these rights, then generally there's a 30-day deadline. And it's really important that, so again, you would contact me immediately as DPO at forsa.ie. And again, we would go through whatever the request is. Generally, it's a data subject access request, but it could be something else that we will go through it and we will work through it. It's really important that we communicate with the member all the time. So just to acknowledge, so I would be doing that. I would acknowledge that we've received the request and that we're processing the request, and if there's a delay in it, again, that we would let them know. And particularly during the pandemic, the Data Protection Commission were quite lenient in terms of allowing some leeway in terms of that, because just even access to files and access to the Forsa offices was problematic. But again, it was all about keeping the data subject informed. That's key here. And again, any of those requests would need to be logged into the Forsa logs that are kept in Forsa head office. So that's important. So I suppose from a data subject rights, that's it. Are there any questions? I'm going to do a summary now. But
there are loads of questions, Martina. So I'll just start kicking off through them, if that's okay.
Linda, if we just stick with sort of questions in relation to data subject rights and breaches, and then if anything else, I just want to do a summary at the end then, okay?
Okay, they are a mixture.
Well, do you want me to do the summary and then we can just finish off? Maybe that's
do you want to do the summary and then I can run through the questions, because they are exactly. They jump across a few different areas.
Okay, I'll do the summary then and then we'll deal with all the questions. Thank you. So just to remember, I suppose, and we started this off, but it is important to remember, and the bottom line is data protection is a human right. And if we're sharing our information with an organization, we want to know that we can trust them. And it's as simple as that. And we live in a democracy. We live in, you know, we may not be happy with it, but mostly our information is treated right. But if you live in another country, maybe not so much, and countries not too far away from here, you know, so you need to think of that, and that's why the GDPR is here. Secondly, it's the law. You know, we may not be happy with it, and it's not Forsa making up these rules. We are obliged to keep the law, and you can see that there are significant penalties and consequences if we do not keep and maintain what we're obliged to maintain. Again, just remember the GDPR principles, and if you remember anything else, just remember the principles and that lawful basis. And generally, one of the, even myself, if something happens, if I get a query, one of the first questions I'll ask the official is, what's the lawful basis they're using? You know, what's the reason why you're using that? And there's all sorts of other details and questions you would ask, but that's the general one, you know, and it's really, really important. Again, we must tell members how their data has been used. So if you're collecting information, you're doing a survey or something like that, you must have a privacy notice at the bottom of that, just to explain to them how you're using your information, how long you're going to keep it for, who else will see it, that type of stuff. And just remember, you know, the other ones: purpose limitations, data minimization, accuracy, and data retention, all really important to remember. And that we keep case files for 7 years, and obviously financial records and things like that, 7 years, or whatever you've been told in your treasurer's training. Again, telling you how to suck eggs. Keep the information safe, secure, and only should have access to it. Only those who need access to it should get to see it. Okay. We use members' data for union business only. Really, really important. We've had a long discussion about FORSA-rep.ie and the SOLAS new membership system and membership lists as well. So just to remember all of that, and really to encourage members to sign up to update their contact details as much as possible, because we can only be as accurate as the information that we're given, and that really is important. And I suppose to finalize, to remember that yardstick, to remember that if you're about to do something with a member's piece of information, would you be happy if that was your information? And again, would you be surprised if a member was contacted by FORSA about something that they wouldn't see as FORSA business? So you just need to be very careful there. And that's pretty much it, I suppose, just in terms to remind you in terms of what we have just done in terms of data breaches. 72 hours to report to the Data Protection Commission. Please, please, please avoid use the to and the CC buttons when sending group emails. And just if you get any data subject requests or any requests from the data subject from a member, please contact me. But generally, we have 30 days to respond. And if you have any concerns, I suppose that's the most important thing, is if you have any concerns, to send an email to myself, dpo@forsa.ie. We had discussed sort of doing additional training. So we're hoping that once sort of the SOLAS in terms of branch access is up, and then again when membership access is up, that we will do more training. It will be sort of pretty much based around this, but with more of a slant on SOLAS as well. And just to say that I do on occasion do training for branches, if branches want me to do training, so just contact me as well. And I will be in Killarney in May, that's the plan anyway. So if someone wants to have a chat with me, maybe just send me an email beforehand and we can organize that. So now I think there's loads of questions. So Linda,
I'm just going to run through them in the order that they came in, Martina, because we're at the end of the session. So is the branch chairperson responsible for ensuring that any branch executive committee member who has access to personal information is trained in GDPR? And can FORSA provide names of branch executive committee members who have completed GDPR training to the branch chairperson?
Well, different branches do things differently. So maybe the branch chairperson, it may be the branch secretary. So just to say that different branches have different roles for different officers. Does each branch, it would be ideal that each branch executive member would be trained. Is it a requirement? You know, training is limited, resources are limited. But as I said, I am available to go and do, and I have done branch training for branch executive committee members. So you know, we can't force people to do training, but the more training we do, the better.
And to be fair, that is from Liam, who is chair of the Health and Local Government branch in Cork. So it's quite a large, significant size branch. So then Marty Lynch has a question. If the branch secretary has access to a member group email address and uses it to inform members of union related activity, how is the branch secretary categorized? Are they seen as the data controller, or is FORSA as the organization seen as the data controller?
Well, you know, FORSA is the data controller, okay, and I hope I was clear about that when the Data Protection Commission deals with FORSA, be it the branch secretary, like the branch is not an identity of its own. as far as the Data Protection Commission is concerned. They see Forsa as one big happy family, and that's the way they view us. So they will deal with me. So if there's an issue in terms of anything, you need to come and talk to me and we can figure it out between us. I hope that addresses that question.
So this is just specifically in relation to a data breach. Does the 72 hours include working days only, or does it include Saturdays, Sundays and bank holidays?
Oh yeah, no, 24-hour clock, Saturdays, Sundays. And that's why they will, when I'm reporting a data breach, they will ask the time, like specifically within the minute. And again, when you become aware of it, specifically within the minute. Weekends don't count.
Martina loves that aspect of her role. So the next question then is, are there any examples of penalties or levels of enforcements that have occurred where it's been established that there was a breach, or where we had to disclose loss of data, or if there's been any individual civil litigation arising from breaches, and if anyone has succeeded in their claim?
Yes is the answer to that. Not from a Forsa perspective, no. But yes, I don't have examples to hand, but there are significant. Now, just to say, in terms of, I suppose, because our Data Protection Commission has been so busy dealing with the Googles and Facebooks of the world, it doesn't mean to say that they have ignored smaller data controllers. They haven't, but maybe they haven't been as active as maybe they'd wish to, and they have in the past year taken on a huge amount of staff, and they've appointed more directors, so they are heading in that direction. It's hard to say what the book of, what the fines will be, but it's looking like the Book of Quantum would say that for each breach, again depending on the severity of the breach, for each action of the breach, it could be about 5,000. So say for instance, we have an ongoing breach and every day we do the same breach. So that 5,000 will be multiplied by the number of days, the number of times that you've done that breach. Okay. It's hard to say, but there are some case studies, and then different regulatory authorities. So say for instance, the French authority would have significantly higher fines possibly than other authorities. So different authorities would err on the higher side. Again, I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, and this is a related question. I think we may not have the information on this yet, is how far up through the courts do the cases go, or have they gone?
Like a lot of cases have been pre GDPR, a lot of cases haven't gone within Ireland. Some have, like the big case there recently in terms of Dwayne Dwyer and things like that, and that was the guards, in relation to that. There hasn't been a lot of case law yet, but it is gathering momentum, and it is only heading in one direction. And I've already mentioned about the Book of Quantum, but again, there isn't a lot of case law there yet.
So again, just more suggestion than a question, I think, around the Forsa Rep emails and a distribution list between branches, so that branches can communicate, and the chat will be saved, Colette, so we will have that as well. I think Owen had referenced as well, it was something he was going to look into. There's a question about freedom of information, which I answered in the chat. And then another question is, to what extent is a branch officer liable for fines or sanctions arising from an accidental data breach when acting in their capacity as a branch officer?
I'm going to address that in a minute, but just to say, in relation to freedom of information, sometimes I would get a request for freedom of information, and just to say that Forsa is not a public body, so we're not covered by FOI, but you would refer them to the fact that we are covered by GDPR, and that they should submit a data subject access request. That would be the process that you would follow there. In terms of branches being liable, this situation has not arisen. I suspect, it depends on the breach, but I would suspect Forsa Corporate is liable, because we are the data subject. So we're the organization that needs to have, and that's why we have processes, and that's why we have policies in place, and we ask that you follow these policies and procedures.
And oh yeah, no, there's still a few. So there's, I suppose, a specific one to a workplace that maybe somebody might want to contact you on privately. It's around a dispute where the employer is not terminating deductions where a member has said they want to resign from the union, which is an issue from the employer. So that might be something, Katrina, that you could contact Martina on privately, I think is the best.
I think so. And we probably need to get finance involved in that as well. So our membership involved in that as well.
Yeah, perfect, because there'd be a few different sections of Forsa involved in that.
Yeah.
There's a general query here about data protection that's not relevant to Forsa, Martina, but it's
fine.
To do with general statements that we'd say might be on guard, vetting statements from an employer or other blanket declarations where, you know, they're asking a member of staff to sign the form, and the statement kind of says, authorizing all corporations, companies, educational institutes to release information about the member staff. And just wondering what your opinion or view would be on that.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't know a lot about Garda vetting, so I'd be only sort of answering it from the top of my head. I can check if that person wants to. Linda, you can identify the person if they want to give their email address, and I will try and address that question separately.
Yeah, perfect. Or probably the best thing to do is for Colette to put through questions to dpo@forsa.ie.
Perfect.
Simon is asking, why are questions being filtered? They're not. I'm going through the chat where a question has been answered. I'm not speaking to it because it's been answered in the chat, but if I've missed something, please let me know. And then Michael, very nice, he says, in advance of an avalanche of questions and queries from all of us, I'm sending you and Linda a cyber bouquet of lovely flowers to help minimize the overwhelming questions to come, and many thanks for the valuable training. That's very nice of you, Michael. But I think one of Martine, I think you can probably stop sharing your screen there as well, because we're coming to the end of it. Look, one of the purposes of the training today is that everybody gets to meet Martina and hear from Martina, and really she very genuinely means it when she says, please contact her with questions and queries. This is part of her role, is to support branches around issues with data protection. It's never possible to cover every single aspect of every single piece of data protection or branch activity in a short webinar, and we hope people can appreciate that. But there is absolutely no problem at all in following up with questions, and you'll get an opportunity as well to put in feedback about the training, and you'll get the recordings of the training, and you'll get the presentation. So if there is, I see some more messages, Martina, if there's anything you want to add there, I'll just have a look to see if there's anything there.
Yeah, just to say again, thank you. Bear with me if there is an avalanche of questions. I've just been on leave, so I've a whole load of stuff to do. So just, you're not going to get an immediate response is what I'm saying to you, but bear with me and I will get back to you. There is, you know, I am available to do branch executive training, and I will be down in Killarney. If you're there, just email me and we can arrange to meet if there are issues. So thank you, because I know we're all really, really busy, and it's a difficult subject, and it's not fun, you know. So I appreciate you bearing with me. And again, the recording will be there. If you feel free to pass that on to other branch executive members, that's absolutely fine. And thank you, I suppose, is the most important thing.
Yeah, no, and listen, thanks everybody for all your lovely messages in the chat. Just to highlight, Owen has added in there around freedom of information. While Forsa isn't covered by freedom of information, some of the government departments and organisations where we represent members would be. And so communication that the union has sent to that organisation that is an FOI organisation may be released under FOI information on that side. So that's just something to flag with people as well. And thank you all very much for your lovely messages. Always the nicest part of a training session is the flurry at the end. So look, myself and Martina will be here for another minute or two for anybody who has any questions. But other than that, I think we get to finish out early and head for lunch. So thanks very much, everybody, and we'll be in touch soon.
Thank you. And we just encourage people to fill out the evaluation forms. They're really useful. So thank you if you could do that.